Are you tired of all the voices who say, focus on the bottom line numbers?
Say whatever you have to, just close the sale.
Just get the credit card. It doesn't matter what you deliver.
You will never build a successful business until you grow a pair and stop caring so much.
Here, we respectfully disagree. We give you permission to embrace who you are, how much you care, and encourage you to design a business that works for you and your clients. Welcome to The Art of Giving a Damn, the podcast that proves with every single episode that you can create a profitable business doing what you're passionate about and making a positive difference in the world. Now here's your host, Michelle Schaefer.
Welcome back to another episode of The Art of Giving a Damn. This episode might be a little bit different than some of the interviews I've done, but I think it's a really important issue to bring out. So, Jeff, welcome to the podcast today.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle. I appreciate you having me on your podcast. I remember meeting you over a year ago, and now I'm on your podcast, so I'm delighted.
Well, I'm glad we connected and have had some of the conversations we have the last few times that we've been in the same place at the same time. For those of you who don't know Jeff yet, Jeff Jones has expanded the context of addiction to families as a focus of skill building and practice within his online community. So you've got sequential online groups for family recovery caregivers.
Right.
And it represents the different phases people go through as they go through the journey of healing. Because one of the things that you and I talked about, and what you specialize is in addiction and recovery, that it affects the entire family and it affects the entire community. And so often, and I know people listening, some of them are really going to connect with this, when somebody you love is going through an addiction and coming out of that, you don't get the support you need to be able to support them, because it's such a big shockwave throughout the whole family and everybody involved. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about how Jeff has taken his mission and turned it into what he's doing in business, and just have a conversation around that. Before we go any further, I want to share your website. For anybody who is looking for support, for help around issues like this, you can find Jeff at thefamilyrecoverysolution.com, thefamilyrecoverysolution.com. All right. So that said, Jeff, share with us how you got into this world and what got you started.
Yeah. Well, I am a therapist. I'm an addiction counselor. I'm an interventionist. And in those roles, I saw patterns over and over. Mm-hmm. And I became curious. And actually, the patterns they reminded me of my own family, because I grew up in a family with addiction, not my family of origin, but my grandfather. And it's a long story that I can't get into, but it's like I was so touched with these families that didn't really understand how to help. So one of the patterns is that they stay focused on that one person, and they don't really see how their strategy to help or their impact is a part of it. So the thinking is, let's just fix Johnny. And then it's like, we're fine here. We can go back to normal. And the definition of addiction, this is a brain disease kind of thing, reinforces seeing it as an individual problem with an individual solution. And I see it bigger than that.
That makes sense. I think it is, and anybody who's been around it, experienced it, had a family member or loved one experience it, we realize it is a bigger problem, and you have to have a bigger solution to it.
Bingo. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So what made you decide to turn this into your life's work, and what you wanted to kind of change? Because that's a big leap to take.
Oh, my God.
I'm going to get people to see this differently.
Oh, Michelle, I tell you, sometimes I feel like I'm hitting my head against the wall. And to me, it just seems so obvious, like something needs to be done here. Yeah. They're like, my own personal family, I did not have the level of suffering that a lot of people I see do, but it's like there's so few services. I was like, this doesn't make sense. And when I'm in the therapist role, I have very few services to like refer families like, hey, have you ever heard of this thing called Al-Anon? And you might want to check it out. And Al-Anon can be transformative, but it's not for everybody. So I don't know. So I just saw this, and over time I put together a sequence of facilitated processes. When I do an intervention, I go from an intervention kind of seamlessly into what I now call whole family healing, which is a 3-phase process. So I get a 6-month contract when I do an intervention. And so after doing that and doing that face-to-face for a while, I was like, wow, there's a lot of family members who can't show up face-to-face. And I started to put it online, and I went kicking and screaming online because I was like, there's no way possible that I can do what I've been doing face-to-face, and come to find out I can do more online and engage more people, and there's more potential for generational healing, quite frankly. So it was creative, and I love to kind of be creative. And sometimes I am in this place, Jeff, why are you doing this? Like this, like I'm.
Yeah, we all ask ourselves that question from time to time. Well, I love that you brought up the point about the internet. I think there's so many people. I know some of those who listen to this podcast, they're either not really doing business online yet, or they're just getting started online. And it's one of those things that sometimes we look at and think, well, I don't know if that's going to work for me, but there's so much potential with the technology we have today to take anything online. And I know people assume that I look a certain age, so they think, oh, you just grew up with technology. I actually didn't. Like, the internet didn't exist. I don't remember cell phones when I was a kid. We didn't have all of that. It came in as I was growing. And so I remember a time before technology, and I'm grateful because it is something that we can take whatever our message or mission is now and reach so many people with it.
Right. Yeah. There's so much potential, and I am, I'm slowly getting more and more support people and help. And I really, really need that because I want to focus on what I'm passionate about, and I want to have good people to support me. And I'm already starting to look for other people on my team, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place to be in when you're moving forward with those pieces and able to really focus on what you do. That's your mission here. So let's talk about what people can do. I mean, if you are dealing with someone else who's going through the recovery process, what do you advise people to do? Like, where do you even start?
Yeah.
To look at bigger picture and the family be there for the support and get the support.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, a lot of this, it depends on the stage of the individual with the addiction. So, what I've done is on my website, I have a river map. And so, probably for 5 or 6 years, I've been doing this whole family healing. So that's at the end of the river. Okay. And at the beginning of it is these different groups that match the experience family members will have with their addicted loved ones. So initially they first start to worry.
Yep.
And worry could be something not even specific to one person. Worry could be something like, hey, we used to have a lot of spoons in the kitchen, and now there's only one. What's up with, and what's with the spoons? And it's I don't get it. Yeah. And, we all kind of know spoons are connected with heroin. And so there's the worry stage. And then next, it's like there's a specific concern, and they, may try to talk or have conversation, specific concern, and then it goes to crisis,
Right.
and then intervene and change and integrate, and then the whole family healing. So each one of those is the family member's experience. The thing that I love about the river is once you get out of the main current of the river, you get pushed off to the side, and actually the water at the side of the river, in an eddy, it goes upstream. So it's going round and round. And actually from that crisis, intervene, you can go back to concern, and then crisis, intervene, concern. And people can stay there for years, or lifetime, just going round and round there. So your question about what can people do, it really relates to where are they at? Because even when their loved one says, well, I can do this myself, I'll go to AA and I'll handle this, or I'll go to outpatient, or I'll get myself an individual therapist or whatever, it's like the problem's not over, and family members have a role. And when their loved one does reach out, that change and integrate group would be like a place that they could get resources, that they could be in a group to kind of learn and understand how they can be more helpful without repeating what they have done before.
Right.
So,
makes sense.
And I could say the same thing with like the worry and concern stage, or the crisis, intervene, back to concern. There's just, some of it is individual conversation. So in a general way, one-on-one addiction always wins. But what I really like to encourage people to do is to really, people who are doing their own work, their own transformative work, their own connection with themselves in a deep way, like they can connect with their loved one in a deep way. And there are ways to connect with a person's personhood as opposed to the addiction. So one of the things that I say that's helpful is, try to, in your mind, in your thinking, separate addiction from the personhood of your loved one. And in your language, try to separate your loved one from addiction. So I oftentimes talk about addiction as if it's another person kind of thing.
I love that distinction, and it's a conversation I've had with others who work in different types of interventions with poverty and other things, to really distinguish there is a person here who is temporarily experiencing this thing, but it's not who they are. It's not part of them. It's something they're going through. And if you can separate that and get back to the core of who someone is,
right,
there's a power in that I think sometimes we miss.
Yeah. And so I'm a therapist, and here I'm going to say something about therapists it doesn't apply to all therapists, but I like the therapist language has contributed to shaming family members. Like, hey, you're codependent, you're enabling, and it's like that language came from the 80s and there were some good things about it, but it's like, when a family member is in crisis, they're in crisis. Their nervous system is activated. They don't have a lot of blood going to the part of their brain where they can make the best decisions. So just trying to find a way for them to calm down, to get more blood to their cortex, they can make better decisions right there. And like, that is a way to see that individual in crisis as opposed to see them as an enabler. Quick little story here. The drug czar, 5 years ago or something, this guy, Dr. Thomas McClellan, and he knows more about drugs than anyone in the country. His son had an overdose. And I saw this video about him kind of saying, hey, I'm the person in the country who should know the most. This happened to me. And at that moment, I did not know what to do.
Hmm.
So every one of us, when we get activated enough, when we see our loved ones struggling, damn near dying, it's
Yeah.
like shit happens.
Yeah. Well,
Excuse my language.
no, it's hard to take yourself out and separate how you feel about somebody. You want to help. And I think you're right. If we can look at it and go, okay, here's some tools, here's the skills, here's what you need to do, and support families with that instead of judging them, putting labels on them at a time when, like you said, your brain is not functioning
Right.
like normal when you're in that crisis mode. And I think so often families want to help. They just don't know how. They don't know what to do.
Right.
This isn't something that they teach us in school. I mean, I grew up in a culture, and this is one reason I see what you're saying about it being a bigger problem. I grew up in rural Alaska, and the natives in the town I was in actually voted for the town to be dry. There was no alcohol allowed to be sold there because it had been such an issue, and they saw how it was ruining lives, tearing apart families. They banned it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I grew up in a little bit of a different environment, and watching how the community really did step up and take that responsibility and say, no, we're going to do things differently here because we see the problems. It gives you a different perspective, right?
Wow. What you mentioned there, Michelle, I would love to get the name of that town, that community,
sure.
Just for my own little, because that's what I'm trying to do on a larger scale, is connect families to families and to create conditions where families can support other families.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of different levels to what I'm trying to do, from individual coaching to group coaching to the whole family healing, one family at a time kind of thing, to families helping families. And it's like, this is possible. This is not rocket science. The internet has the tools to make this possible.
Yeah.
Why are we as a country not doing this? I don't get it.
Yeah. That's one of the things that strikes me about the time we live in. There is such ability with technology to actually take the things that previous generations saw as problems and wanted to solve and tried to solve. We have the ability to actually move towards that solution so much faster because of the connection we have. So for your notes and anybody else listening who's curious, I grew up in Bethel, Alaska. I spent 13 years of my life there from the time I was about 4. And it was different. I mean, there was a lot of alcohol abuse. There was a lot of problems like that the community got creative, I think, in a lot of ways. And the health corporation there looked at, okay, what do we need to really do to support changing this? And it does. It affects the entire family. It affects the entire community. And sometimes it requires drastic measures. I didn't know until I was a teenager that was not normal. I just thought that was the way communities worked. But it's one of those things that I'm thankful for it, because it did give me that perspective of, there is an element of social responsibility where we can step up and help each other.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I see, if I'm going to, step up on my soapbox just a little bit, is
go for it.
Our culture is an incubator for addiction.
Yeah.
There's many things out there in the form of privileges that we have, in the form of things that people make money off of. And, things that we really love and enjoy that we can become addicted to. And, we're supposed to be able to navigate that process ourselves. And a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And our culture, with the, many drugs, they just get more refined and more refined and more powerful and more powerful and more. And it's when I grew up, I like to smoke pot, and pot was 4% THC.
Oh, wow.
Like that. It was like dirt weed. And now it's 30 or 40%, and wax or shatter is like 97%. And it's this is tripping material. and it's legal now. And so the culture contributes to this problem. And what your community did in Alaska is kind of what I see that families can do. They can create protective factors, essentially, to create conditions that are inhospitable for addiction to grow. Families can do that, like with the family rules, with kind of like the way they interact with one another, and having dinner together, staying connected, doing things together. And not all families, like there isn't one prescription that fits every family. Families need to really talk about this together. And I mean, it may be easier if it's like mom and dad and they have 2 kids and they're not quite teenagers yet and mom and dad are both on the same page. It might be easier, but if one of them like is smoking pot on a regular basis, this is going to be hard for them to create conditions in their own family, like the community that you grew up in.
Yeah. And yet that's such an important thing to do. I think that's one of the things that I appreciated was there were certain boundaries that I grew up with that made it really not a temptation or not an issue. And the way to approach that really does depend on the person's personality. I know other families who their parents approached it completely differently, but it worked. So like you said, it's not a one size fits all. It's more looking at, okay, who is the person in there? What's their personality? How do I support their goal to, get away from that addiction, be in recovery? And it's one of those things that there's a million solutions. You just got to find the one that works for the person you love.
Absolutely. And I really love what you said. There's a lot of solutions. You just need to find the right one. And how do we do that? Families so oftentimes feel isolated and they have no choices. And when they start talking with others and go, oh, you've been through this too? Well, what did you try? What worked? What didn't work? And those kind of conversations, those are golden.
Yes. That's the conversations we need to be having more of. And instead of putting a stigma or judgment on it, just saying, hey, you know what? This is part of the human experience right now at this period in time. What are we going to do about it? Let's just have a discussion. I love that. Well, for those of you listening who heard Jeff talking about his river map, if you go to his website at thefamilyrecoverysolution.com, yes, thefamilyrecoverysolution.com. We'll put a link near this video or audio wherever you're listening, and scroll down on the page a little bit. You'll see not just that map, but each of those phases. If you click on them, take you to a page where Jeff's recorded a video specifically about what to do in that phase, what your next steps could be, and how to figure out where you're at and do something about it. I just wanted to mention that for anybody who's listening and really thinking, okay, I feel like I'm in crisis, or I feel like I'm in worry. What do I do? You can find resources on Jeff's site that will help you navigate through that and eventually get to the end of that path. So
wow. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Yeah. Thank you for what you're doing and for coming on and sharing a bit with us about it. I appreciate your perspective on it and what you're working to change. I think it's really important.
Well, thank you.
All right. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in and listened today. Again, if someone you know, or anybody in your world is dealing with these issues, send them to Jeff's site or reach out to Jeff, have a conversation with him about what you can do, how you can get the support you need to make a difference, because you're there. If you see this, somebody is depending on you to be the one that helps them out. So take some action, share this with anybody you know who would find it useful. And thank you again for tuning in today.